Just before I bang up my slides, if you think you can hear jazz music, it is because you can. So Beth and I are together in a hotel lobby that we were assured this room would be quiet, but the hotel staff have decided to give us some lovely background jazz music. So you don't have to pay extra for that. So just hopefully that'll add a little bit of value to the presentation. I'm now going to go up to the main screen, hopefully. Hopefully you can see that. So that's myself and Beth. So today we're going to cover a practical guide really on how to bid and win, and a very quick overview on the buyer process, or the mind of the buyer, in terms of planning, defining, bidding, procuring, managing, etc. If you could just hold that slide for a second. Then we'll go on to how to bid. Then I'll show a complex example of the competitive flexible procedure. Then Beth will take you through, from a VCSE perspective, how to be bid ready and some top tips, and also how to win. And then we'll cover a little bit about finding the opportunities, which can sometimes be quite of a challenge. And then we'll finalize with Beth just giving you a quick overview of the organization that we're representing, Constellia, and their neutral vendor model. So this first slide really covers the buyer process, and credit is due to the Cabinet Office. This is the so-called procurement pathway that you can find on .gov.uk, and it really shows you the key steps or the mind of the buyer from a procurement process point of view, from planning a procurement in terms of the strategy and the plan, and also publishing commercial pipelines, which is helpful, to defining the opportunity in terms of what is the business need, assessing the market and market engagement and sourcing strategy. Then moving on to the procurement phase, the tangible bit where the documents get sent out through an e-tender portal, and normally you would go through a selection stage, evaluation stage, clarification, and then award and implementation. And of increasing importance is the managed phase, where the contract is managed by the necessary contract manager. And obviously the latest transparency agenda has heightened the importance of that, with the publishing of key performance indicators over contracts of 5 million. So that's just a high level view of the buyer process. Perhaps the most important advice I ever give to SMEs and VCSEs, particularly in my procurement role, is to consider whether you should bid or not to bid. And I'm often asked the question, well, you know, how can you decide that? So this is probably more for bedtime reading, but it just goes through some of the considerations that you should make in terms of, fundamentally, does it fit your business strategy? Is it commercially viable? And can you really make it work? Can you deliver the contract as stated, or can you adapt the contract and maybe expand your organization, or collaborate, or set up a consortia that I know was mentioned this morning by Claire Dove? And how well do you know the client? And if you don't know the client well, or the place well, or the project well, can you find out more? And obviously, because of the transparency agenda and the increasing amount of engagement, there's opportunities to explore that to see whether this is the right project for you. Also, we need to consider, are you really positioned to win? You may in fact be the incumbent, which in theory should not give you an advantage, but it does give you past knowledge of the project and the organization that you're working with. And if you're not, how you can overcome that. And then fundamentally, the big question is, can you actually deliver the bid, and have you got the corporate resources to do it? So there's a lot of things to think about there, but I think given particularly VCSEs and the shortage of resources and how busy the organization generally is, it's important to think hard about this in terms of whether you decide to bid for a contract or not. This is the bidding process. And again, I'm going to acknowledge a friend of ours, Alison Collier. She is the leader of an organization called 2Team. She is referred to as the bid wizard. So this is her slide. Feel free to get in touch with Alison if anybody on the call needs any advice on bidding, and Alison actually does bidding for organisations as well if that's needed. But this really shows you the 6 stages in terms of quality, develop, produce, finalise, submit and learn. But there's some important points here in terms of, I always say read the documents and read them again, because it really is important to gain an understanding of the project and decide whether to bid or not, as we said in the previous slide. Then you start to develop your strategy, gathering information, creating various templates, your storyboard for the project, and starting to consider the planning for answering the various questions in line with the award criteria. You then go to the most, I guess, the important phase of produce, where you write, you're designing and reviewing and refining. And it really is important to spend time on that aspect to make sure that you've got a good quality submission ready for your final checks and for your sign off. And then obviously submit. And I think Beth's going to touch upon this. I've had many experiences in the past where suppliers have left it to the last day, to the last hour, and even the last minute, and you never know, things can go wrong. And because of the transparency of procurement these days, it really is important to submit your bid on time. So make sure that you plan early and communicate your bid to the contracting authority within the time frame. And the final stage, really, I guess, is whether you win or whether you don't win, is to reflect and to learn and to feedback that into your, into future bids. And again, what is helpful, strong organisations give good feedback to suppliers in terms of the winning bidder and also how your own bid performed, and then you can make the necessary changes. I'm not going to go through this, you'll be happy to know, but this it just shows you probably the most complicated procurement process that you're likely to envisage. The narrative for the Procurement Act is that it makes things simpler, and it does in many respects, in terms of the fact we've gone from 7 procurement procedures to 3, which is the open, the competitive, flexible, or the direct award. So 7 to 3 is obviously less. However, the competitive flexible procedure, if you look here, means that organisations now are free to design the procurement process themselves. They're not following standard steps with standard timescales, as was the case previously under procurement contract regulations. Every buyer going to market can design their own procurement to suit the needs of the project. Now, there's opportunities to influence this through preliminary market engagement, and that's something that I would always recommend. But you can see here that in this particular case, there'll be a participation stage. There's 4 different stages potentially of assessment that includes demonstrations, that includes negotiations, that includes best and final offer, and then you go into the contract award phase. So that is probably the most complicated of scenarios that you're likely to face, and a lot of the competitive flexible procedures you'll see will be more simpler. But I think it is important to understand, as projects are more complex, the more likely it will be that the buyers will look to increase the number of tender stages. So that's one to think of for the future. I'm now going to hand over to Beth, who's going to take you through how to be bid ready and what VCSEs need in place.
Hi everyone. So becoming bid ready and what VCSEs need in place. So when we talk about being bid ready, we're really talking about
making life easier for your organisation before an opportunity comes up. So the government procurement is structured, formal, and it can be overwhelming, but don't let that scare you. Once you put the basics in place, it becomes far more accessible, and being prepared gives you a huge advantage because it means you can respond quickly when opportunities do come up. So being tender ready goes beyond simply submitting a proposal. It's about being strategic positioning your organisation. So a toolkit can be really handy, providing and preparing core documents and policies. So this could be insurances, compliance, any other policies you might need, such as modern slavery, certifications and case studies all in one place so they are up to date and ready to go. Outlining your organisation's social value priorities, so having your story ready. So is this a strategy? Is this a published statement and targets, etc.? Evidencing impact for bid submissions. So you already know the difference that your organisation makes locally, but buyers need to understand this as well. So having case studies and evidence all up to date makes the tendering process much easier and quicker. Procurement terminology. I think since working in public procurement, I've realised the turnaround times and deadlines for tenders are very fast. So familiarising your organisation, your teams with the terminology may help speed up the tender process and also help the process overall. Government social value model. So understanding the government social value model's priorities and themes can help when submitting tangible measures that align to your organisation and also to the contracting authority. So having that knowledge can help prepare for your response. Again, understanding the buyer, so understanding their priorities as well, their challenges, their specific requirements will help you to craft a tailored and relevant response. So some top tips. I won't run through all of these, but I think my top 4 I would say is answering the question properly. If it specifies talking about added value, then obviously refer to added value. If it specifies certain criteria, then refer to certain criteria. I think this is really important. Often I've seen questions that aren't answered properly, so you'll essentially lose scoring points. Evidence and case studies, as mentioned in previous slides, using evidence and case studies. This just ties everything together and shows you can deliver what you are committing to. And making it easier for the buyer. So the buyers will be looking at loads of tenders and loads of responses, and just making your answer more streamlined and concise and easy to read will certainly help with the process. And evaluation criteria. So this is the bidding Bible, I would say. Follow the evaluation criteria when creating your response and you should receive a top score. So building a winning bid. Telling your story, so help the buyer understand who you are, what difference you make. And for many VCSEs, this is your strongest point. This is your USP. So you know your community the best and how to make the most impact. Make your response structured, concise, and directly relevant to the requirement, and make sure you just tell your story. Responding to the question, break down the question and answer each part clearly. Mirror the wording of the question so evaluators can easily follow your response and tailor. Measurable initiatives. So essentially this is about giving confidence that you can deliver what you have committed to. So make sure it's proportionate to the contract and deliverable for your organisation, and give clear, concrete actions using numbers, timelines, methods that demonstrate your approach to the commitment. So, for example, you could say we will support 25 local residents into employment through our accredited training programme over the 12-month contract period. That would be a really good example of a tangible, measurable initiative for a bid. So again, evidence. This helps to back your bid. So using the case study, showing real results, feedback, relaying specific outcomes that you have achieved. Demonstrating value, so explain how your organisation delivers social impact, community and economic value, and highlight your community connections. Make the case that your value is unique to the contracting authority and the buyer. Collaboration, I always say collaboration is key, and I stand by that. If you're working with other VCSEs, outline the roles clearly, or if you're working with other stakeholders, show how collaboration will improve impact or reach wider communities, and demonstrate how those partnerships could basically benefit the contract. And if not partnering, emphasize how you collaborate with local stakeholders and networks and community groups.
So often I'm asked about finding opportunities, and I think and some of this was touched on by a couple of people this morning, but there's various routes to market. Now, you can be direct contract with a public authority as a tier 1 supplier, but that may not be appropriate or suitable for everybody, depending on the particular project. You can also support the supply chain of a tier 1 supplier. So maybe a tier 1 supplier to the contracting authority is awarded the contract, and that you have a relationship with them, or you could develop a relationship with them to obtain contracting opportunities. Obviously, providing services to fellow VCSEs in the sector. You could also be a lead bidder of a consortium that was talked about this morning. You could also collaborate with others within a consortium, or maybe more loose arrangement where you're collaborating with others, maybe in some form of partnership. There's also still the occasional opportunity to deliver via grant funding agreement, and Beth will touch upon this shortly, is the opportunity to contract via a framework or a neutral vendor. In terms of identification of these opportunities, from a procurement practitioner point of view, I think most of us were pretty grumpy when we saw the amount of notices that buyers need to put in place that gives transparency for the whole procurement life cycle. And it is quite burdensome, to be candid. Nevertheless, the information that is provided and being provided is proving to be really, really helpful. And all of this information is available on the single digital platform that Claire Dove opened up with this morning. So you can see, for example, the various technical references there, UK1 and so on. Importantly, you can see a pipeline notice where organisations of a particular size, over 100 million, have to publish their future procurement schedule and what they expect to buy and in what particular period. Now, they're not held to it exactly, but it does give early notice of opportunity, and that's particularly helpful, I think, to the VCSE community if, for example, you think that it might be appropriate for you to collaborate in some way, maybe via a consortia, because I know from my days heading up Durham as head of procurement there, quite often VCSEs were saying, well, this could have been a great opportunity if we'd have known 8 months ago that it was going to be coming available. So those pipelines are really important. Following on from that is what is proven to be incredibly popular, and probably the most popular notice used since the Procurement Act came into play, is the preliminary market engagement notice, which is an indication that the buyers are ready to talk to the supply base. And that's an opportunity for the buyers to understand the market, but also importantly, this is a two-way process. So it's an opportunity for suppliers to influence the process, the award criteria, the evaluation criteria and weightings, terms and conditions, etc. So, and it also gives you a really, really good understanding of the potential project, as well as an opportunity to influence it. Then obviously you get the planned procurement notice and the tender notice, and that's when the procurement will start. You may, through some of the advice that I gave earlier, in terms of you may decided not to bid at tier 1, but you may, for example, decide it might be appropriate to get involved at tier 2, or further down the supply chain. So again, you can see some of the later notices there about contract award notice and contract details notice will indicate which particular company has won the bid. So there's several opportunities and several intervention zones that you can get involved in that hitherto was not available under public contract regulations. So despite the perceived bureaucracy, I think the transparency agenda is going to be proving to be really, really helpful for VCSE organisations. Beth?
Yeah. So as Darren mentioned, the neutral vendor model framework. So Constellia are a neutral vendor model framework provider. So we act as a conduit between the contracting authority and suppliers who go through pre-qualification process and accreditation process, and then you can sit on our marketplace. So suppliers can join the marketplace at any time, and if anyone wants more information on the marketplace, please feel free to contact myself or Darren, and we will give you some more information on that. So the benefits of the Constellia neutral vendor model. So we can help with navigating social value requirements and tenders, maximising support to VCSEs and SMEs by increasing the number of organisations on the marketplace, so making it easier for you to win work with contracting authorities. And we're fast, flexible, and compliant to market and easily accessible. So that's Constellia. And yeah, it's been great to talk to you guys today about becoming bid ready. And yeah, any questions, I think we'll get those after, I believe, volunteer.
Great stuff. Thank you so much, Darren, and thank you, Bethany.